and welcome to this council meeting of the 8th of November, which is being live streamed. The meeting is being held online in accordance with state government recommendations in response to the COVID-19 requirements. I'm Lydia Wilson, Chair of Council, and I'd in turn like to introduce my administrator colleagues. Firstly, Ms. Peter Duncan.
Good evening, everyone.
And Mr. Chris Eddy.
Good evening, everyone.
And I'd also like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Craig Lloyd, and ask that he in turn introduces council officers in attendance this evening. Thanks, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So I'd like to introduce our Executive Manager Governance and Strategy, Mr. Frank Joyce, our Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms. Kate McCackey, Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Amy Montalti, the Executive Manager Public Affairs, Ms. Janine Morgan, Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Justin O'Mara, and a Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms. Debbie Wood. Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon this council to make informed and good decisions to benefit the people of the city of Whittlesea. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespass as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. I now hand back over to the Chair of Council, Lydia Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. On behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. And I'd also like to personally recognise and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Before moving into the general business of council, there's a couple of matters of acknowledgement that we would like to make this evening. Firstly, I'd like to mention the inaugural City of Whittlesea Community Awards that took place via an online ceremony on Wednesday, the 27th of October. And these awards clearly provide an amazing opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate the extraordinary contributions of individuals in the City of Whittlesea. There were 5 award categories with 23 individuals who were nominated, and a number of those individuals were actually nominated multiple times. All of the administrators were present on the evening, as well as members of the Community Awards Committee and obviously nominees as well. And the awards were on Council's website. I'd really like to acknowledge all of those amazing nominees and also the award recipients. But I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Duncan, who was a member of that award committee, and ask her to talk a little bit more about the award recipients. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. And just on behalf of myself and the committee members that were on the nominations panel, a big thank you to all of those people. It was a wonderful group of people and we were overwhelmed with the absolute outstanding nominations we received. I just would like to go through who the recipients were in case anyone missed our live stream of the awards. And so the recipient of the Sustainable Environment Citizen of the Year award was Hansika Sharma. And at only 13 years old, Hansika was recognised as someone who is absolutely driven, approachable and knowledgeable about a wide range of sustainability issues. She actively initiated clubs and campaigns to promote change within her own community. So a big congratulations. The next recipient was the Young Citizen of the Year award, which was awarded to Rudra Sekri, and Rudra is a community-minded young person who's highly engaged in efforts to create a sustainable environment with his contribution to the City of Whittlesea Climate Action Plan Change and focus group, and he was especially noteworthy in being involved in that for the council. So another fabulous young person. The Senior Citizen of the Year went to Shukri Sidrak, and Shukri has spent more than 2 decades volunteering his time and expertise to help the City of Whittlesea community by providing free tax services, which is really important, I think, and advice to low-income earners as well, and long-term volunteer with one of our big partners, which is Whittlesea Community Connections. And the Access and Inclusion Citizen of the Year Award was awarded to Lynn Harris, and Lynn is absolutely tireless in her commitment, with a long history of supporting people with disabilities and promoting opportunities for participation, which is really, really important. And finally, the Citizen of the Year Award, the big award, I suppose you call it. This award went to Dharman Shrivastava, and provides fantastic selfless service to the community through his charity Dee Dee's Kitchen, particularly during the pandemic, an outstanding effort there. So a sincere congratulations to all of the recipients of the awards, and also along with those who were nominated. It was a fantastic quality of people that were nominated this year.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Thank you. From all of us, again, sincere congratulations to all of the nominees and to all of the recipients of those 5 awards. And we're really hoping that there will be opportunity in the very near future to meet with the award recipients and say congratulations in person. I'd also like to specifically note a really important state government announcement that was made on Sunday, the 31st of October. And I had a great privilege of attending in person for once, alongside our Chief Executive Officer, and that was held at Crusader Caravans in Epping. And we were really delighted because the Minister for Employment, Jala Pulford, attended to make a really important state government announcement, which was contribution by the state government to 150 jobs, and it is a partnership project in conjunction with the Caravan Industry Association and also Northlink, which is really going to benefit the North and obviously our local economy. Some facts that I wasn't at all aware of, and that is that Melbourne's North is actually the heartland of the nation's caravan manufacturing industry, and that some 20,000 caravans, or 90% of the Australian total, roll out the door of a Victorian factory each year. And the sector is worth $2.3 billion to the Victorian economy. So a really, really important sector. We were delighted to be present to listen to the partnership announcements that were made, and we're looking forward to how that might roll out over the ensuing period. So if we move on, I note that all administrators are present this evening. And administrators, if you have a conflict of interest in relation to any item on the notice paper, you may verbally disclose the type and nature of the interest now, but you must make immediately before consideration of the matter in question. Administrators, are there any items for which you have a conflict of interest to declare?
No, Chair.
Chair, if I may,
Eddie?
yes, I'd like to flag that I will be declaring a general interest in item 6.1.1, Community Leadership Program Framework, due to a relationship I have with a party that's involved in that report, and I'll leave the meeting while that's being discussed and decided.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Eddie. I also just want to note that I've got no conflict of interest in relation to any item on the agenda this evening. Due to Administrator Eddie's declared general conflict in relation to the first item of business, item 6.1, I would like to move that we alter the order of the agenda this evening and defer item 6.1.1 to the end of the meeting. And this will then be held after item 10.4, at which time Administrator Eddie can physically leave the meeting. Do I have a seconder that motion?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I will now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried. Thank you. I now seek a motion to confirm the minutes of the two preceding meetings. The scheduled meeting of Council held on the 4th of October 2021 and the additional meeting of Council held on the 25th of October 2021. Do I have a move?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. And a second, Administrator Eddy. I'll now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour of confirming the minutes? The motion is carried. I note that there are no public questions received for the council meeting. And I also note that there are no petitions or joint letters this evening. So administrators will now be working through the agenda. And as I indicated before, item 6.1.1 will be deferred until later in the meeting. So we will move on to item 6.1.2, which is the joint letter requesting council to amend parking restriction in Bramman Walk Laneway. And if I could ask our Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms Debbie Wood, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to hand over to the Manager of Urban Design and Transport, Mr Arishdeep Singh, to talk us through this item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Wood. Mr Singh, over to you.
Thank you, Ms Wood and Chair. A joint letter regarding Bramman Walk Laneway petition was signed by 16 residents and received by Council and tabled on 6th of September. Concerns were raised of limited parking opportunities in the vicinity of the residential area and requested Council to remove no stopping parking restrictions in Bramman Walk Laneway to allow additional parking of the residents. Bramman Walk Laneway was constructed in 2011 as part of residential subdivision and provides a common access laneway to 18 townhouse garages. The laneway was not intended for parking or for pedestrian access. There are 21 parking on-street parking spaces around the area, and all are within short accessible distance. In addition, the townhouses abutting the laneway all have 2 off-street parking spaces as per the requirements of planning scheme. Council officers undertook 7 various on-site observations in September to determine current parking demand in the immediate areas. On-street parking observations indicated an average on-street parking demand of only 29%. So that is 6 parking spaces out of 21. And council officers also reviewed the existing safety conditions along the laneway and found that existing parking restrictions inherit by providing adequate sight lines, that is for proper ingress and egress for vehicles from the garages. Parking occupancy service indicated there are adequate parking spaces in Pender Hills Road and Overland Drive that are in close proximity to the concerned residents. So I put forward to maintain the existing no stopping parking restrictions in Bramman Walk Laneway to ensure that safety residents are compromised, and advise the head petitioner and petitioners of the outcome of the council resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Administrators, do you have any questions relating to this item?
No, Chair.
Administrator Eddy?
Yes, Chair. Mr Singh, I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more to the times of day those various on-site observations were taken. I guess I'm just wanting to get a sense that they were taken at various different times of the day.
Yep. Through you, Chair, the inspections were undertaken between 11th of September and 15th of September, and they varied from 8 AM in the morning till about around about 7. It was at the review. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also note in the report that you observed a number of garages were being used for purposes other than housing vehicles. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, yes, Administrator Eddy, the officers did notice that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, administrators? No. Do I then have a mover for the officer's recommendation for item 6.1.2?
Chair, I'd like to move that, but I'd like to move a slightly different motion than what is printed, just to recognise that this is in response to the joint letter. And you'll see that wording on the screen, but I will read it. That Council, in response to the joint letter from 16 residents residing in 13 properties, requesting removal of existing no-stopping parking restrictions. 1, maintain stopping parking restrictions in Brahman Walk Laneway to ensure the safety and accessibility for residents is not compromised. And 2, advise the head petitioner and signatories to the joint letter of the outcome of the council resolution. And I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy, and I'm happy to second the recommendation with the amendments that are shown on the screen at the moment and you've read out. Administrator Eddy, what is to this item?
Very briefly, Madam Chair, I think as Mr. Singh has described, officers have, I think, quite diligently looked into the issues raised in the joint letter. They've clearly been taken very seriously. I note a couple of things that are in the report. 7 different times the observations were made and there was nothing to confirm an issue with parking demand. It's also noted as we move out of COVID-19 restrictions that parking demand is likely to be lowered in the area, and a number of garages were being used for purposes other than housing vehicles. So I think on balance, this is a reasonable outcome.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy, and I concur with all of the comments that you've just made, and really there's nothing further for me to add. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 6.1, petition request for indented parking spaces in Honeyeater Terrace, South Morang. And again, if I could ask our Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms Wood, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I would like to just call on Mr. Singh to present this item.
Thank you, Ms Wood. Mr Singh.
Thank you, Ms Wood and Chair. It's again the petition containing for Honeyeater Terrace, containing 47 signatures from residents in Honeyeater Terrace, Whittlesea Walk, Silver Eye Place in South Morang was received and tabled in council meeting 6th of September. The petitioners highlighted request of indented spaces in Honeyeater Terrace. They also highlighted that road is narrow and unsafe parking on both sides. Delivery and garbage collection issues are experienced due to the issues highlighted in the second point. Honeyeater Terrace, Whittlesea Walk and Silver Eye Place residential streets at the southern end of Riverside in South Morang. The function of these streets is to provide residential property access to standard residential housing. Traffic volumes and speeds are at the lower end of the as expected for the local residents. The streets have very good safety record with no recorded crashes in the last 5 years. There's adequate road width to facilitate delivery vehicle access, and council's waste collection contractors reported that no access or garbage collection issues are experienced in this area. The installation of indented parking bays in established areas are generally considered in situations where there is either insufficient space for parking within the properties, or there are no legal existing on-street parking opportunities for the residents in close proximity of residential properties. There are approximately 50 legal on-street parking spaces along Honeyeater Terrace, 11 in Whittlesea Walk, and 15 in Silver Eye Place. In addition, all properties have garages, and many of these properties have long driveways, providing additional parking that can be accommodated off-site. 3 site inspections conducted in September indicated that current on-street parking demand is considerably low. There were 17 cars parked in Honeyeater at the maximum time, 17 cars parked in Honeyeater Road, 1 in Whittlesea and 5 in Silver Eye, equating to 30% of the available car parking for all those 3 streets. As existing parking demand is low in the area, indented parking bays construction is not recommended, as there are no tangible benefits and also may impact streetscape adversely. So I put forward the recommendation to note that there is ample on-street parking available and streets are accessible for delivery and garbage collection vehicles, maintain the existing parking conditions as there are no safety or operational benefits from it, and indented parking bays would have a detrimental impact on street trees and services. Advise the head petitioner and petitioners of the outcome of the council resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. for that very comprehensive overview of the report and recommendations. Administrators, do you have any questions relating to this item of either Director Ms. Wood or Mr. Singh?
Yes, Chair. Just Mr. Singh, can you just confirm that residents did report issues around the waste collection, and was it subsequent to that that we then got the contractor's report to say that there was no issue?
Through you, Chair, yeah, Administrator Duncan, yes, the residents raised in the petition that they have got issues around garbage collection in the local area, and that following that we did consult our garbage collection contractors if they have noticed any complaints or any issues regarding that.
Right, and it's confirmed that there's no issues at all?
Yeah, through you, Chair, Administrator Duncan, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions, administrators? Mr. Eddy.
Yes, Chair. I am concerned about this issue of near misses that the petitioners reported. They've said many near misses in the street when cars were parked on the road. I get it's obviously very difficult to assess that because there'd be no record of near misses, but I wonder how officers weigh up that issue in their consideration of the request.
Yeah, through you, Chair, Administrator Eddy, we checked the standards or the width of the road and the construction of the road against the Australian standards, and all the roads, especially Honeyeater, Terrace, that meets the required Australian standards adopted for our residential streets that allows parking on both sides and still provide a availability of minimum requirements of service vehicles to go through at the centre of the road.
So if I may just follow up, just to be clear, there's nothing physically different in this street to any other street that would contribute to the likelihood of more accidents?
Yeah, through you, Chair, Administrator Eddy, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions, administrators? No? Do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.2.1?
Yes, Chair, happy to move.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. And a seconder, Mr. Eddy. Ms. Duncan, would you like to speak to the item?
No, thank you, Chair.
Mr. Eddy?
I'm not sure I can add anything to anything the mover said, so no, thank you, Chair.
In that case, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
Item 6.2.2, joint letter sealed path construction in Tasman Park, Bundoora. And again, Ms. Wood, if I could ask you to introduce this report and recommendations.
Thank you, Chair, and I will speak to this report. So a joint letter from the community, 22 residents, was received just requesting that the existing granitic path, which is a sand path in Tasman Park, be replaced with a sealed path such as concrete. The joint letter was initially tabled at the September 21 council meeting for consideration and requesting officers to come back to council with a recommendation. So this report in front of you tonight outlines the works undertaken today and the officers' response to the joint letter's request. In reports, the officers have spoken to the joint letter lead to discuss their concerns and proposals. So just for context, Tasman Drive Park and Playground has a small playground in it. It's roughly 2,000 square metre neighbourhood park, and it's located between Tasman Drive and Alto Close in Bundoora. It has as I said before, a small existing playground. which is scheduled to be upgraded as part of the whole park and ground renewal of the site in 24-25 financial year. The existing walking track, or the gravel path that we're speaking about, would be upgraded as part of that upgrade to a concrete path. So this report actually recommends that this whole park upgrade, including the kind of the path, be brought forward to next financial year, so 2 years in advance of where it was at. As an interim, until that up is completed next year, we will actually just make sure that the gravel path is topped up and it's maintained to a level which will stop some of the pooling of water. And some of this work has already been completed. Consultation with an engagement with the broader residential community will be carried out prior to the whole park, just to get some thoughts from the community about how they currently use the park and how they see they would use the park going forward with the improvements. So I just put to you the recommendations as per the report, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Wood. And sorry, you might have mentioned it and I might have missed it, but your communication with the lead who wrote the joint letter, what was their response to the proposal to bring forward the playground as well as the concreting of the pathway?
So we haven't got into all the detail just yet with what that might look like, because we wanted to come through council and get council's approval to do that first. But once the recommendation goes through tonight, we'll have some further consultation with them. I think the fact that they can see that they'll be getting the path, they'll be satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you, Ms Wood. Any further questions, administrators? No? I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 6.2.2. Do I have a seconder? Mr Eddy, thank you. I'll just make a couple of comments. I think this just makes such good common sense. And I think the notion of making sure we maintain the gravel pathway, top it up and maintain it, but bring forward the proposed works, which is for the park and playground renewal, which, as Ms Wood indicated, are currently scheduled 2 years out, just makes such good sense to be able to combine the two projects at the same time. And for residents of the area, they get the benefit of having the pathway concreted, but also the renewal of the playground. So I really applaud this particular recommendation and the fact that the playground renewal will be occurring next financial year, which is in 2022-2023. Eddie, would you like to also speak to the item?
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, I just want to thank the petitioners for bringing this, or the joint letter writers, I should say, to be technically correct, for bringing this to us and making us aware. I think this is a sensible response, and it's for local government. I think it's showing a bit of agility and flexibility in the solution that's been put here, as long as we do pay attention to that pathway if there's weather conditions, etc. Concerns me that people use it as a thoroughfare to medics, etc., which implies potentially people with mobility using it. So as long as we're keeping a close eye on that, and as we say, we're bringing forward those works in that area, so it should be a good outcome ultimately for all concerned. Happy to support it.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms Wood. Item 6.2.3, Domestic Animal Management Plan, and if I could invite our Director of Planning and Development, Mr O'Mara, to, I think he's going to introduce one of his officers to present this particular report and recommendations. Mr O'Mara.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to introduce our Manager of Compliance and Environmental Health, Debbie Blandford, who will provide a brief overview of the report and recommendations.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara. So tonight we're presenting the Domestic Animal Management Plan after our final round of community consultation that was held in September. As you may recall, we drafted the plan based on about 3,000 pieces of information provided by the community, and this last round of consultation was to check that we got it right and that there wasn't anything that we'd missed. So during this last round of consultation, we received a further 110 submissions, about half of which were regarding the proposed cat curfew and proposed mandatory cat desexing, both of which will be the subject of further community consultation in 2022. We also received some really terrific ideas from the community about how to strengthen our plan, and this included feedback about pet registration fees and how fees are currently quite inconsistent across the state. And while Whittlesea's fees are at the lower end of the scale when compared to other councils, there are some large discrepancies in fees, which has led us to including an action to advocate to the Victorian Government to set standardised fees across all 79 Victorian councils. We've also placed a bigger emphasis on community education and engagement, with items including things like adding more opportunities for the community to meet our animal management officers, such as at dog parks, at community markets and events, highlighting some education initiatives such as at local schools, holding an annual pet expo, hosting online information sessions and some DIY workshops, and partnering with registered dog trainers to present demonstrations, and with local vets to share information about responsible pet ownership. Lastly, we've also added an action to review our domestic animal welfare support policy, which outlines how council provides temporary care for pets belonging to people experiencing family violence. If the plan's adopted tonight, our officers will write to each person who provided a submission and to advise how council plans to use their feedback and to say thank you for their submission as well. So in closing, we put forward the recommendation that you have before you tonight to adopt the Domestic Animal Management Plan.
Thank you, Ms Blandford. If I could perhaps just ask an initial question, can you just clarify further the proposed timing of the community consultation in relation to that very complex issue of cat desexing and cat curfew, which we know there are quite strong polarised views in relation to those issues. You indicated that the consultation will be occurring in 2022. Can you just talk a little bit more about the proposed consultation or timing?
Through you, Chair, we plan to start our consultation in March 2022 with decisions to be brought back to Council later on in the year. So probably mid to late next year, we'll be coming back to you to make a decision.
Thank you, Ms Blandford. Administrators, are there any other questions you have in relation to this item? Mr Eddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note we're being asked to support, and I've just changed the page, support advocating to the state government about consistent pet registration fees across all councils. I wonder if Ms Blandford could say a bit more about where that's come from, and because I understand there was some feedback in relation to differences of fees across different councils. Am I correct?
Through you, Chair, that's right, Administrator Eddy. We've done some benchmarking with our neighbouring councils and also other councils across the state, just to see how Whittlesea compares, given that we had some feedback that our registration fees were quite high in comparison to some other councils. And when we've done that benchmarking, Whittlesea's fees are actually down the lower end of the scale, but we did notice that there's quite a lot of discrepancy between fees being charged by all 79 councils across Victoria, and some of the suggestions that we had through the consultation process was that we should be adopting a similar model to what's in New South Wales, where registration fees are actually collected by the New South Wales government, but there's a standardised fee across all of the New South Wales councils, and that was suggested to advocate to our government in Victoria to set a standardised fee across all of Victorian councils.
And just to follow up, are we aware of whether any of our perhaps neighbouring councils in the various sort of alliances we're part of would support that advocacy position at this stage?
Through you, Chair, we actually haven't asked our neighbouring councils yet, Administrator Eddy, but we do have some really great relationships with our neighbouring councils, and I'm very confident that they'll be on board with providing some support for our advocacy and joining in on that as a partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions, administrators? No. So do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.2.3?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr Eddy, and I'm happy to second item. Mr. Eddy, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a big one. This is one of the bigger ones, certainly in my time here as an administrator, and I just want to assure the community we've had numerous discussions and briefings on this issue, and as Chair Wilson said, some of the issues are quite polarising in the community, so it's a bit challenging to find the right way through some of this. We've taken a balanced and measured approach ultimately with the plan, and as Ms Blanford has said, a lot of community feedback has gone into this, over 3,000 pieces. What's really clear is the level of passion and dedication that many of our residents have towards the issue of responsible animal management, and I absolutely support that. We've had to consider and balance a range of views and suggestions, and I'm confident we've arrived at a plan that balances the responsible pet ownership with the community and environmental needs as well. There's a really clear theme around the need for a greater focus on education and awareness activities, and you'll see that reflected in the various initiatives that are outlined in the plan. As has been mentioned briefly, we should highlight that while the idea of a cat curfew was explored during the consultation, we're planning to conduct more targeted consultation on that matter in 2022, but in the short term, we're getting behind the Safe Cats, Safe Wildlife program and doing all we can to promote and encourage the containment of cats to owners' properties through that initiative. I want to thank the many community members who've contributed to the development of this plan, and I want to congratulate our officers who've worked really diligently to prepare what I think is an excellent plan that strikes the right balance. And on the issue of consistent registration fees across councils, certainly support that. I think that would help for community understanding and awareness if there was a level playing field, I guess, across all councils in relation to that. So happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy, and I concur 100% with all of the comments that you've made, and would also like to make some additional. The Domestic Animal Management Plan is our really critical document guiding the way that we will manage domestic animals over the next 4 years. And as Mr. Eddy indicated, as administrators, we've really carefully considered this matter. We've had a number of briefings with council officers. We've had a look at some of the content of submissions and the feedback that has come in from community members and the multiplicity of key stakeholders. And like Mr. Eddy, I'd also like to thank the many members of the community and key stakeholders who have fed into the DAMP. And as Ms. Blanford indicated, we've had 3,000 pieces of feedback, but we still checked in with residents and we got the further 110 submissions, which I think is really, really important. I really believe quite strongly that the document that is in the council papers this evening is an even stronger and better document than it was at the outset. And it's been really well informed by the feedback that has been received through the whole community consultation process. And it's really great that the council officers actually included the track changes in the report that's within the council papers. So it's really clear what are the changes that have been made. And Mr. Eddy also mentioned, as Ms. Blanford did, that there's much greater emphasis now on proactive and preventative measures, including a great emphasis on public education. And Ms. Blanford, I think that notion of opportunities for the public to actually meet with our animal management officers and find out about local animal services, the things we do, not just when there is a problem, is a really, really important element of the current plan, as is partnering with local vets and also registered dog trainers. I think they're really fantastic initiatives. Ms. Blanford commented, and Mr. Eddy did as well, that our officers have also looked at best practice interstate and across Victoria as well. And it's really great to see that has been undertaken and the research to further inform the document. I strongly agree with the notion of the advocacy to the state government regarding registration fees for dogs and cats. I noted that there were some submissions that specifically commented about Whittlesea fees, and then we were fortunate enough to have a look at the benchmarking data in relation to some of the relativities, as Ms Blandford has already indicated. I just want, in concluding, to really also thank our staff for their amazing work in preparing the plan and how responsive they've been to the really invaluable community feedback and also from key stakeholders that has come in to get to the point that we are now. So we look forward to the next phase after adoption, which is also some separate consultation in relation to that issue of compulsory cat desexing and also the cat curfew. And hopefully we will be able to engage with the community in person in relation to some of the consultation. So thank you again, Ms Blandford, for all the efforts of council officers in developing the DAMP, and I'm really pleased to be seconding the item. Any further comments in relation to this report? No. In that case, I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again. Item 6.2.4, proposed declaration of road, Cameron Street, Donnybrook. And if I could ask our Director of Corporate Services, Ms Amy Montalti, to speak to this item and the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. This is a procedural matter to commence the process to declare Cameron Street, Donnybrook a public highway. This will facilitate the development of the Olivine estate by Mirvac, who is the developer. The recommendation seeks council approval to commence this process, give public notice of the proposal, and also nominate 2 administrators to form an advisory committee to hear any potential public submissions to the process, and also a further report to be presented to council. The only point of note that I will point out about this report is that the Local Government Act 1989 still continues to apply where there is a declaration for a road to be declared a public highway, and that's why you'll notice that the recommendation does specifically require this proposal to be communicated through the print media rather than online. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms Montalti. Administrators, do you have any questions in relation to this item? No? Do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.2.4?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to move the officer recommendations, but with the insertions of the 3 names of the administrators. So Administrator Wilson, Duncan and Eddie, just to be added there, to be the advisory committee of the council to consider written submissions and to hear those persons requesting to be heard.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'm happy to second it and really pleased that all 3 administrators will form the advisory committee of council. Would you like to speak to the item further, Ms Duncan?
No, thank you, Chair.
I don't see Mr Eddy having his hand up, so I will, no. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank
you, Ms Montalti. Item 6.4.1, road closure, Vince Road, Wollert. And again, Ms Wood, if I could ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to again introduce Mr Singh to present this item to Council. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Wood. Over to you, Mr Singh.
Thank you, Ms Wood and Madam Chair. The report considers the closure of Binns Road, Wollert, between Harvest Rome Road and Lehmans Road, The proposal of closure of this road is consistent with the development and local road network as part of, as per Council strategic planning for Quarry Hills a precinct structure plan, and also meets the requirements of future E6 strategy. The section of Bints Road between Lehman's Road and Harvest Time Road provides no direct access to local properties, and as such is no longer required as an access road. This discontinuance is identified in councils at Quarry Hills PSP and also again E6 future strategy. And the road closure will significantly impact local traffic, assessing the residential properties within the area, as we have got a parallel collector road, Salt Lake Boulevard, that will take most of the traffic that used Bints Road. It's as for the proposal of closure of the road, will be following the process as stipulated in Road Management Act, especially for community services consultation. So the feedback will be sought from emergency services, bus operators, utility, and Department of Transport. A public notice advising closure will be placed in the print media. A formal letter to owners and occupiers of properties within the area will be provided. Social media posts on council will also be utilised along with the signs within the area on either side of Bints Road where the closure is proposed. The road closure has significant potential to reduce the road safety risks along the road too, because it is a rural road and within an urbanised area, and also it will further reduce the maintenance obligations to council for a road that is not required for access for the local properties. Due to rapid pace of development in the area and potential road safety benefits, it is recommended to commence the discontinuance of Bints Road as per the requirements of Road Management Act. So I'd like to put forward the officer's recommendations as stated in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Administrators, do you have any questions relating to this item? No? Do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.4.1? I see Mr. Eddy is happy to move the item. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Mr. Eddy, would you like to speak to this item?
Very briefly, Madam Chair, Mr. Singh has very clearly outlined the reasons for this proposal coming to us. The section of road provides no direct access to any local properties, not required as an access road. There is a safety issue, and this gives us significant potential to reduce the road safety risks along that road, as well as reducing our maintenance obligations. And I note that it won't significantly impact local traffic accessing residential properties on Bints Road. So I'm happy to take this first step in what is a formal process and take community views on it in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Any further comments, Ms. Duncan? No. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you.
Item 6.4.2, petition, removal of Woodstock Drive and Shetland Way, Doreen. And I think Ms. Wood is, might not be, I was going to say is going to introduce and speak to this item, but I think she might be introducing the item and handing it over to, or introducing our council officer in attendance. Ms. Wood.
Thanks, Chair. No, I will talk to it, but I do have Will here, our council officer, if we have any specific questions. So just in way of introducing, a petition was presented to council on the 1st of September 2021, and it contained 12 signatures requesting the removal and replacement of all existing, there's 42 existing street trees in Woodstock Drive, between, it's east of Brookwood Avenue and Shetland Way, Doreen. The grounds on which the signatories believe the current trees are not suitable include some adventurous tree roots, which they believe are causing damage, as well as that they are large trees that have been overplanted with 2 to 3 outside most residents in their view. So this street is dominated by mature Eucalyptus scoparia, which are quite large gum trees, if you can picture that. It is a species, though, that is listed on our council-approved street tree list, so we do have a number of these around the municipality. And I think, as you know, urban trees, they provide countless environmental, economic and social benefits. They contribute to the livability of the city. They support community health and wellbeing and enhance the character of our urban areas and townships. The city manages and maintains over 100,000 urban trees across Whittlesea in their streets and in their open spaces, and we're trying to plant, over 1,000 new trees every year. But as urban development increases and vegetation on private land starts to diminish, the provision and protection of our street trees in public realms, it will become more important, and it is something that we really have to consider. So for those reasons listed above, any decision around the removal of street trees is always undertaken with a lot of consideration and care. A visual tree assessment was undertaken by our arborist, and the trees were noted that a few of them were in health, and some had some fungus that was observed as well. So following an assessment of the trees, the senior arborist has recommended that we do agree to the removal and replacement of 42 trees as part of the council's mains, road and high profile streetscape planting program, and they will be replanted as part of that program in the next planting season. Consultation with what type of species that will go back into the street will also be undertaken prior to the planting. So I'll just add the recommendations as per the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. I wonder, you started to talk then about the fact that the removal and replacement that'll be occurring in 21-22 financial year. And I presume the replacement will be in the next planting season. When approximately will that be?
Planting season usually kicks off around April, May, June, July. We would anticipate that there isn't a big gap between the removal and the replanting of the trees. That's how we usually aim when we have these type of projects.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Wood. And having been on site at other such issues, I note that there have been many instances where residents obviously want to ensure that there's a minimum delay between the removal and the replanting of the trees. Thank you. Administrators, have you got any further questions at this stage of Ms. Wood or Mr. Jones? No? I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 6.4.2. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I think Ms. Wood did a really good overview of this particular issue. And obviously, as administrators, we've previously been well briefed on this particular matter and have considered it really carefully because, as Ms. Wood has indicated, we've got our greening Whittlesea strategy and we've got our commitment to increase tree coverage and tree canopy. So it's really unfortunate, obviously, when we have to consider tree removal. And Ms. Duncan indicated that, in fact, we've got the target of 1,000 new trees annually that are being planted. But I think on balance, clearly the advice from our arborist and the assessment is that those trees, the 42 trees, are suffering from ill health and there's a significant dead wood and dieback. And on that basis, I am prepared to move this particular item. Ms. Duncan, would you like to speak further to the item?
No, thank you, Chair. I think you've summed that up perfectly.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms. Wood and Mr. Jones. Item 6.5.1, Contract 2021-100, Fuel Cards and Associated Products. And again, Ms Wood, if I could ask you to introduce this item and the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. From trees to fuel. So the purpose of this this report, Chair, is just to go for the contract. It's actually an existing fuel contract which expires on the 31st of January 2022. It's a contract that will supply fuel to all of our vehicles, and the recommendation is engaging Ampol Limited as a primary supplier and Viva Energy Australia as a secondary supplier. And this is via the state purchasing contract. It was all based on an evaluation that considered the price, as well as the number of fuel outlets and the close proximity of these outlets to Council Civic Centre and to the key depots as well. So I'll just take the recommendations as per the report, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Wood. Any questions, administrators, in relation to this particular contract? No, and I have no questions either. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.5.1?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Mr Eddy, would you like to speak to the report?
Not greatly, Madam Chair. There's been a thorough process here. An objective of that fuel outlets in the municipality and the proximity of these to fuel outlets to the civic centre and key depots. It's a practicality that's required, and I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Anything further, Ms Duncan? No. I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thanks, Ms Wood. Item 6.5.2, update on the current COVID-19 pandemic response actions. And if I could invite Mr O'Mara, Director of Planning and Development, to introduce this item. Mr O'Mara, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to introduce our Manager of Emergency Management and Regulatory Programs, Andrew Mason, who will provide a brief overview of the report and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara, and thank you, Chair. Since March 2020, COVID-19 has deeply affected many businesses within the City of Whittlesea, and consequently, the effects on businesses, reduction of staff and staff hours have directly impacted individuals and families in our community. This report summarises Council's initial actions from March 2020 and provides a comprehensive update on the current COVID-19 pandemic response actions taken by Council. All departments within Council have continued to actively respond to the COVID crisis, supporting business and community. This report highlights the numerous actions, projects and programs run by Council officers. All the programs highlighted in this report, in addition to the $2 million Community Recovery Action Plan endorsed by Council in July this year. In this report, we have proposed a number of recommendations to further support our business and community, including the waiving of food and health registration fees by 50%, waiving of fees for sporting clubs, and a number of recommendations to support and encourage outdoor dining. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mason. I wonder if I could just start off with an initial question, and I might ask Mr O'Mara if he could perhaps respond, or it might be even our Director of Corporate Services. This is really an exceptional report detailing a part of our pandemic response to date and proposed further actions. Will we be producing a composite report in due course detailing all of the in-kind and also direct costs of the pandemic on council operations across the board, whether it's revenue foregone, fees and charges, or grants that we have made, or just that in kind. And I know that that sort of information is really important, both for the Municipal Association of Victoria, our peak body, and also for the state government.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, the intention is to prepare a composite report at the end of the current period of lockdown, supporting the businesses in this post-lockdown period. Given that we have provided estimate figures in the report today, we do need to make sure that we get an accurate figure based on the number of businesses and sporting clubs supported if Council does resolve on the recommendations today. So that's the intention, that we also capture other in-kind aspects of what Council departments and teams are doing as well. So we are providing a lot of team member hours to support a number of these activities as well. There's a lot of community engagement activities Council's undertaking at the moment to support information booths and to really encourage the community to get vaccinated. So there's a number of things we're doing in this current environment that we intend to capture and report back to Council and the community.
Thank you, Mr. O'Mara. Administrators, do you have any further questions? No. I would be very happy to move the officer recommendation for item 6.5.2. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Eddy, thank you. And I would like to speak to this report. And I and we have spoken many times before on the impact of the pandemic on our community and on business in Whittlesea. And also we've had a recognition that Council needs to show leadership and positive and proactive support, and that we've got a really key role to play. And we've clearly on this subject had many, many briefings and discussions with Council officers. It's obviously, in a way, uncharted territory with many different approaches that have been taken by councils right across the state. And I just wanted to note how very proud I am, and I know the administrators are as a panel, in relation to the incredible work that council officers have displayed essentially over the last year and a half during the pandemic. Not only have council officers had to adapt the way that we provide our services, but they've actively sought funding from government and every possible source for community and economic development programs. And we've got a really good track record in relation to the receipt of government grants. We've strongly advocated to the federal and state governments. And I think that we've also really carefully thought through creative ways by which we can directly support local community members, businesses, community groups and sporting clubs to minimise the impact of the pandemic on their operations, and also recognise the fact that for many people they've had an inability to raise revenue during this period. I think it's even commendable that we've recognised the need to support privately owned shopping centres. And that's what this report is all about, a range of new initiatives to support our local businesses, sporting groups, and some really, really amazing work that staff across the organisation have undertaken. And I strongly endorse all of the initiatives that are recommended in the recommendation that we're considering this evening. Would the seconder like to speak to the item? Administrator Eddy.
I'm not sure there's more to add, Madam Chair. I support your comments, particularly support the efforts that our officers have gone to come up with a suite of initiatives that help particularly small business at the moment and into next year. I'd love to think that this sort of support is going to make headline news like the opposite has elsewhere. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case, but I do commend everyone for the efforts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Ms. Duncan, anything further?
I just concur with what yourself and Administrator Eddy have said. I think it's been a phenomenal effort particularly 2 years now, really. So, and particularly in this last strain of the virus, I think it's been just unbelievably fantastic. So well done to all of our staff.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Mason. Item 6.5.3, Quarterly Corporate Performance Report, quarter ended 30th of September 2021. And if I could ask our Director of Corporate Services, Ms Montalti, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to introduce Council's Chief Financial Officer, Mark Montague, who will introduce this report.
Thank you,
Mr.
thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. The report provides Council with an overview of corporate performance for the quarter ended 30 September in key areas including financial performance, capital performance, and progress of the community plan. With Council's 4-year community plan being adopted after the end of the September quarter, reporting on community plan key initiatives for 2021-22 will commence in quarter 2. For the September quarter, an update on key achievements under Council's strategic planning framework has been included in the report, with key quarter 1 activities including the finalisation of the 2021 to 2025 community plan and the 2021 to 31 financial plan adopted by Council at a special meeting on the 25th of October, community consultation on Council's draft domestic animal management plan, which has been adopted in its final form by Council this evening, and ongoing pandemic recovery management throughout the municipality. Financially, Council's operating surplus for the September quarter was $1.5 million unfavourable to the year-to-date budget, due largely to the impact of the COVID pandemic on Council's operations, totalling approximately $900,000. This was made up of approximately $270,000 in direct costs and approximately $700,000 in foregone income, largely due to facility closures, including the use of Plenty Ranges and Convention Centre by Northern Health as a state-run mass vaccination hub. I'll touch on Council's operating surplus as I normally do, highlighting to Council that this number is often impacted early in the year by the timing of rate revenue being reported, and for the full year by the significant value of income Council receives from non-monetary asset contributions, which do not convert into additional cash for Council to use to fund its services and programs. Having said this, it is anticipated that Council will achieve a break-even cash result for the 2021-22 year, meaning that all available cash generated by Council during the year is being invested back into our community. From a capital works perspective, Council's capital program was almost $1 million ahead of budget at the end of the September quarter. This was largely due to good progress on early programmed renewal works, particularly in road resurfacing. It is important, and I'll make the note to Council, that it is still expected that delays relating to COVID will have an impact on the deliverability of Council's 2021-22 capital program as we progress throughout the year. This is highlighted in the report recommendation to Council, and officers will make Council aware of such impacts in future reports to Council as they become better known. The recommendations are as noted in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions that Council may have.
Thank you, Mr Montague. Administrators, do you have any questions of Mr Montague or Ms Montalti? No, that must have been such a comprehensive overview that you didn't leave any room for questions. Thank you, Mr Montague.
Come up with one if you like, Madam Chair.
Do you have a question, Mr Eddy?
Well, yes, actually, I was going to ask. Look, I think I've answered it myself, but I was keen to hear a little bit more about the capital works expectations, given that we're slightly ahead after the first quarter, but we're still predicting that we'll be probably unable, is what I'm reading, to deliver the entire program. Do we have a sense at all yet of the significance of that shortfall at this point of the year?
Sure. At this point in time, Administrator, officers are still working through those numbers internally, and it's anticipated probably around the half-year report time that we'll have a much better indication of what programs have been impacted deliverability-wise by issues to do with the pandemic from that side of things. So we'll be able to give a much better picture at that point in time.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I've asked how long's a piece of string, and I'll get back.
But an important question, Mr. Eddy, because that was also a concern. Obviously, it's something we need to carefully monitor, what our performance in relation to capital works delivery and the impacts of the pandemic. If there's no further questions, do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 6.5.3? Thank you, Mr. Eddy. And a seconder? Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Mr. Eddy, over to you to speak to this item if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, this wraps up a number of things that we've seen in various guises along the way, such as the community plan, which we've spoken to at length, the financial plan. We've just spoken about capital works. Officers are keeping a close eye on how all of those programs are being impacted as we move, hopefully, out of serious pandemic stage and into more of a recovery phase. I just commend the team for the work it continues to do under very trying and challenging circumstances. And I think if anyone takes the time to read this summary of the quarterly performance, they can see that it's business as usual, and I think we're making the best of a challenging time. Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Ms. Duncan, as a seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
Just what Mr. Eddy said, I totally concur with him, and I think, yeah, it's a very good report, and Montalti and Mr. Montague and the whole team.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. I note that there are no notices of motion. And administrators, are there any items of urgent business that you have this evening? No? In that case, could I now ask Administrator Peter Duncan if she'd like to provide an update to council and members of the public in relation to activities over the past month?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the past month was a big lead up for our community awards. So I had many meetings with the community awards panel, and that was to set up the panel, what the event would look like, and then obviously the nomination process, and then the actual awards presentation, which we all attended last week, I think it was, which was fantastic. A CEO Employment Matters and Advisory Committee meeting with your good self and Administrator Eddy, and also a business breakfast with local members for Parliament, which yourself and Mr. Eddy were at as well, and also the joyous event of doing our citizenships online. So I attended 4 of those, which was fantastic and really fabulous to welcome those people as formally Australian now. And then also an online session for local homes for local people in regards to Ashline Street. So that was quite interesting there. So that's it from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Are there any questions of Ms. Duncan? I've got no questions. Mr. Eddy? No? Could I then ask Administrator Eddy if he would also like to provide an update to council and the community in relation to his activities?
Thank you, Chair. There's been a bit happening in addition to what Administrator Duncan has already highlighted. Just this morning, I attended the NAGA executive meeting, that's the Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, and was really pleased to hear about the work that group's been doing, particularly around advocacy in relation to the planning and building systems and how changes to those systems can support decision-making with climate change mitigation at the forefront as a priority. I understand we'll see and hear more about that in the months to come. The NAGA annual report has been finalised. It tells a really exceptional story about the work and achievements of the past year, not the least of which was the launch of the Victorian Energy Collaboration, of which Whittlesea is one of 46 participating councils in the state. It's the biggest local government collaboration in terms of energy savings in Australia, but not for long, unfortunately. We're about to be trumped by one in Western Australia, by the sounds of it. Last month, I attended the latest Metropolitan Local Government Waste Forum, which was another terrific opportunity to hear about the latest information about waste management and recycling initiatives. We received a presentation of some things that are happening in Europe around waste-to-energy facilities, and people are looking really closely at those trends in other parts of the world. It's a hot topic in Australia at the moment, as you'd be aware. And I was particularly pleased to be present at the first meeting of our new business advisory panel. I think that was a couple of weeks ago now, noting the high level of interest and commitment from the members of the panel. I'm very confident that group is going to be extremely effective in providing insights and advice to the council, as we do all we can to continue to support the business community in the city of Whittlesea. So I think that's enough from me, Madam Chair. There's been a bit happening, all of it online, of course. Looking forward to some of those things happening in person soon.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy, and I'll be very interested to learn more about some of those waste-to-energy trends and best practice and what is happening overseas. Any questions of Mr. Eddy? No. I've also had a very busy past 4 weeks, and I will just quickly run through a couple of particular highlights, noting that I attended the CEO Employment Matters Advisory Committee with my colleagues, a board meeting of Whittlesea Community Connections, and also Whittlesea Community Connections annual general meeting, which was really quite wonderful as a celebration of the activities of Whittlesea Community Connections over the past year, and a lot to be very proud of. As Mr. Eddy indicated, and Ms. Duncan, we had the inaugural meeting of the Business Advisory Panel, and I think that is really, it's going to be great working with the panel and hearing their support and advice to council in relation to economic development issues for the municipality. And I also had a meeting of the Yarra Plenty Regional Library Board. Ms. Duncan already mentioned the online information session in relation to affordable housing, but I'll just also highlight that we had the business breakfast with local members of Parliament, which all of us attended along with the executive leadership team. And the CEO and myself have also actively participated at a number of meetings with local members, members of Parliament, and in relation to the interface group of councils. So we met with Steve Dimopoulos MP during Interface Week, and also Richard Riordan MP, also during Interface Week, and we've got a number of other sessions that are planned over the next week. As Ms. Duncan indicated, the Community Awards presentation was a really wonderful event, as were our citizenship ceremonies, which we've all attended, and I also attended the 4 sessions of citizenship, and I've already mentioned the important announcement by the Minister Jala Pulford in relation to the 150 jobs. All I wanted to do in concluding, if I could, is take this opportunity to make an acknowledgement that I probably should have made at the start of the meeting, but I will conclude with it. And that is recognition of the service of our amazing Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Amy Montalti, who has served 7 years at the City of Whittlesea. We're very, very sad to farewell Ms. Montalti, and now is not the time to obviously go into long speeches, because we'll have the opportunity to formally recognise her. But I just wanted to acknowledge that this is unfortunately her final council meeting before the next part of her employment journey. We're extremely sorry to see Ms. Montalti depart, and I know I echo the comments and sentiments of my colleague administrators in just recognising her very significant service to the City of Whittlesea and the community of Whittlesea over many years. So Thank you again, Ms Montalti. And I'm happy to respond to any questions that there might be from my colleagues before handing over to the Chief Executive Officer. Any questions, Ms Duncan or Mr Eddy? No. Could I now ask our CEO to provide an update to Council and members of the public?
Thank you, Chair. This Wednesday, we're hosting a Vax Chat Q&A with a number of doctors, including Dr. Craig Boltins from Northern Health, who has assisted us with a number of sessions so far that have been very well attended. This session will have Macedonian, Arabic and Vietnamese interpreters available, and it's an online session, of course, and people can register via our Facebook page and our website. Our vaccination rates have increased really significantly over the past month. As of today, 92% of our community have received their first vaccination, and we've hit 82% that are double vaxxed. That's a 5% increase in second doses in just 1 week, which is an incredible effort by our community, I think you'll agree. If you're not yet vaccinated and you still do have questions, please do consider jumping onto that online session on Wednesday. The increasing rates, as well as the state government's changes to restrictions, means that we can continue our program to reopen. Today, we were pleased to be able to reopen our customer service centre in South Morang, and that is for our community members who are double vaxxed. So if you need to do business with council and it's your preference to do that face-to-face, you can now do that. In some very exciting news, we're very pleased to be able to announce that we're shifting our annual Carols event on the 10th of December to being a hybrid event, which means that as well as continuing online, we will be able to have a reduced number of people attend in person. So there's some more information to be released on that shortly, including about our ticketing, and all of that will be available on our arts.whittlesea.vic.gov.au website shortly, or you can find that from Council's homepage. As we move to reopen, our teams are also very busy with construction work, as was heard earlier on in an earlier report. Work has now begun on upgrading the soccer pitch and the pavilion at the HIUN Recreation Reserve in Thomastown. The first stage of that work will include a FIFA-approved synthetic pitch and seating for spectators, and that stage is expected to be completed by March next year. Also, another exciting project is the long-awaited work at the Whittlesea Public Gardens in Laylaw. That has now commenced, and the first stage will include a sprawling new playground, play tower, double flying fox, as well as a learn-to-ride area. And that first stage is also expected to be completed by mid next year, mid-2022. Also pleased to see the skate park in Whittlesea Township now getting a refresh. Our staff have worked with local families to come up with a new design and equipment to suit every level. So whether you're just starting out or you're aspiring for being part of that skating gold medal attempt at the next Olympics, hopefully this skate park will help you. And also in partnership with the Lorimer Primary School, we've also completed 2 new floodlit courts on the school grounds. And these courts are there to support not only the school, but our local Lorimer Power Netball Club to be able to train safely. So with summer just around the corner, the Whittlesea Swim Centre, our outdoor pool, has reopened to the public, and the splash pad at the All Abilities Play Space in Mill Park is being turned on for the season. I was out there late last week, and it was very busy with young children playing around splashing. It's a beautiful warm day and very well visited, as we know. That splash park operates from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day. And finally, as many of us start our Christmas shopping, some will be more advanced than others, please consider supporting local businesses when you're shopping. It's been a tough couple of years, particularly for our small business community. So every dollar we can spend in small businesses locally will help local families and local small businesses to rebuild as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd, and I thought that was an excellent overview of and update on some of our important infrastructure projects and also in relation to pandemic response. I can't help but again comment about the Vax chat that is coming up on Wednesday. Really, really important, and the fact that it is going to be with community languages or with interpreters in attendance. The vaccination rates, 92% and 82% double vax. That's just an amazing effort by our local community, and also very exciting to see the reopening of our customer service centre, and that we will be doing a hybrid in relation to our annual carols celebration. I think that's a really wonderful thing, so that there will be some in-person activities. And I'd also just echo the comment about, let's see that if we can't support local business. Administrators, do you have any comments or questions of Mr. Lloyd?
No, Chair.
Thank you again, Mr. Lloyd, and I need to note that all of our verbal reports will be documented in the minutes. Thank you. So now it's time to return to item 6.1.1, which is for feedback, the Community Leadership Program Framework. Mr. Eddy?
Madam Chair, before you get into this, as I flagged at the outset of the meeting, I would like to declare a general interest in this matter out of an abundance of caution, I should say. I am a contractor to the Victorian Local Governance Association, which will potentially be partnering with the Council in delivering some of the elements of this program that's under consideration. That may give rise to a perception of a conflict, so therefore I'm declaring an interest, and I will absent myself from any discussion or consideration of the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy, and we will just wait a minute then till you depart the meeting.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Eddy.
Suppose with a whole bunch of trees, and there's somebody
item, which is the Community Leadership Program Framework and its recommendations. Thank you, Ms. McCackey.
Thank you, Chair. The new City of Whittlesea Community Leadership Program is a major initiative of our recently endorsed Community Plan 2021 to 25. And the leadership framework being presented to Council tonight describes the key elements of the program, which will continue to adapt and evolve over time, particularly as we get community feedback through the implementation. In essence, the City of Whittlesea Community Leadership Program's driving intent is to make it easy, welcoming and accessible for any member of our community to get involved with, find out about and build their leadership skills. This might be to build leadership skills for a formal civic role, such as being on a community advisory committee or running for council in 2024. But just as importantly, it's also about supporting community leadership at the grassroots, so that anyone with a good idea about how to improve their local area and community can access skills development opportunities, resources and networks which help them to achieve this. The program has been designed to run for this council term with a suite of activities for differing levels of interest, including one-off events and workshops through to longer-term leadership courses. Over the next 4 years, we hope that this also increases the diversity of leadership within our municipality, with participants coming from a range of backgrounds, including from culturally and linguistically diverse communities, newly arrived residents, young people, older people, women, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and also for issue-based leadership such as in the environment, the arts, etc. Whilst the program will officially commence in 2022, Council is holding an online introductory event session this Thursday, the 11th of November, from 6:15 onwards, called Leading Change for the Greater Good. This event is a partnership with the Victorian Local Governance Association and is an opportunity for locals to learn how to harness their influence and lead change for the greater good. And I'm really pleased to be able to advise that we've had over 80 people register for this event to date. The recommendation for this report is that Council endorse the City of Whittlesea Community Leadership Program Framework, which includes a centralised digital resource, interest-building events, introductory training, as well as civic leadership and community-based leadership pathways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McCackey. Could I just start off with a quick question? The report indicates that there will be a comprehensive communication and engagement plan that will be developed to ensure that there is the widespread promotion of the program. Can you just really comment briefly on what's being proposed there?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. So there'll be a range of engagement activities, particularly thinking about language as a barrier, engaging with people where they're already sort of have started to participate, so through community groups, etc. Going and talking to people at senior citizens groups and that sort of thing. So really trying to get interest from people who are already engaged with a level of interest, but also working with schools, youth advisory group, etc. To really spread the word through a range of different networks.
Thank you, Ms. McCackey. Ms. Duncan,
So I
any
should also say, sorry, just that we're going to really work with partners, so such as the VLGA and other sort of peak bodies as well, to sort of really get the word out.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan, any further questions in relation to this item?
No, thanks, Chair.
So do I have a mover then for the officer recommendation for item 6.1.1?
Chair, I'd be happy to move this item, but with an additional recommendation as follows. And that is, and it's up on your screen here, but I'll read that. That the that the Whittlesea Community Leadership Program be widely promoted across the municipality through social media, council's website, and at council's community and leisure facilities, libraries and relevant community agencies.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Yes, I just see that there's community and leisure facilities, libraries and relevant community agencies.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm happy to second that the recommendation. Ms. Duncan, would you like to speak to the item?
Just briefly, Chair, to acknowledge what a fantastic opportunity this is for people within our community. And I think already having 80 registrations is just excellent. So I can't stress too much more than please get involved, because this is a wonderful opportunity to sort of get that educational leadership program from the council. And it may be that to do things within the council on committees, as Ms. McCackey has said, or even to run as a councillor in the elections in 2024, but just to generally have that leadership style. And it may be if you're in a small business and you need just a bit more education or something, if you've got your business is growing and how to lead staff, it just covers every gamut, I think, of what's available for people through this program. And I think it's absolutely sensational. So well done.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. And I can only echo all of your comments. This is a really exciting community leadership program, and it is aimed at people of all ages and all backgrounds from across the city. And Ms. McCackey commented about the launch of the program, which will be on Thursday the 11th. And I know for a fact that there's an incredibly impressive group of panellists who will be part of that online event. I'm really thrilled with Ms. McCackey's comment, as Ms. Duncan, that already we've got some 80 registrations. So that's really, really heartening. And I think, Ms. McCackey, the fact that there's going to be a suite of activities and a whole range of multi-pronged approaches is just a really commendable. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. And if we could perhaps take down the recommendation. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the open meeting, and as there are no confidential items to consider, I therefore declare the council meeting closed. Thank you all.